Clearly, we're already seeing some major damage from this dam breach. My next guest has some insight into some of the hardest hit areas and what can be done to help reverse the damage. Andriy Dobryansky is the Director of Communications and Media for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. If there are others under the sound of my voice who are like me, then we're not always thinking about where, let's say, our food comes from. But this war has triggered a global food crisis, and the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam is exacerbating that. How is this happening?
You touch on a big point here, which is that the crime of this. Already since the full-fledged aggression began over a year ago, Ukraine at this point has somewhere between 20 and 30% of its area that can be used for agriculture. That area has been mined as of now. So if we're talking about the breadbasket of the world, if we're talking about a country that feeds, that its grain and its oils feed Northern Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia in particular. This is why the United Nations and other international bodies are very much worried about this war spiraling out of control, not so much because they value the lives of these people more, and frankly, there are activists in Ukraine that want more attention on this, but because of how much Ukraine is tied into this entire international system. And therefore, once you get rid of the food, as you touched on, then there are the after effects. And for those in Ukraine, it's not just the food, but it's where you get clean drinking water and where you dispose of unsanitary water. Both of those are a big concern now in that affected area.
Yeah, something that I saw in some reporting from the Associated Press is that Black Sea region is called the global breadbasket because of the wheat and the barley that's produced there. So right away, you can kind of connect the dots and see how this may have an impact, not just in the region, but outside of it. It's been more than a week since the dam collapsed. And while we have seen the immediate impact through lost lives and livelihoods, the Associated Press has called this a slow-moving ecological catastrophe that could harm future generations. What is on the horizon?
Well, surely those of us in America are used to, sadly, tragedies like this. Some of us may remember what happened in the aftermath of Katrina, but maybe most recently we remembered the tragedies in Puerto Rico. And in that instance, it wasn't necessarily the scale of the devastation of the hurricane and when it passed, but it was all the lives that were lost in the after effects. Once the weather had cleared and no emergency workers were able to reach people, no power, no clean water, and more people died. Similarly, in Katrina, we know that so many people died who were unable to get any help afterwards. Thankfully, much like in the United States and our Cajun Army, there are lots of volunteers who are willing to go out there on boats and go house to house to house. But it's not an easy task, especially since Russia is currently firing on Ukrainian volunteers. We have seen no rescue operations on the Russian side. The United Nations has a team ready to go in, but they have not received any security guarantees from Russia, so they are holding back their international helpers. It's all these things that are compounding the problem. And just to put a darker tone, possibly, that wasn't mentioned in your report, and it was a fantastic report, but part of the reason people are worried about the water quality isn't necessarily just because of chemicals. There are a lot of cemeteries in that area that was flooded, and a lot of those cemeteries, they have seen things bubble up from there that is instantly water that you shouldn't be touching at all. And then even more sadly, as with the after effects of the storms I mentioned earlier, the area that was downplain of the dam was already evacuated by maybe 50,000 people. 70,000 were in the floodplain itself. It was evacuated when the occupation began in February and March of 2022, leaving only those who frankly couldn't move, elderly, infirm. Those are the people who were stuck in homes and tragically drowned to death within their homes. And that is yet another toxicity, those dead bodies floating within homes that's being washed downstream.
Wow. Just really grim imagery there. But that's the reality. Aside from immediate relief for the people who are living in or have been evacuated from this area, what can be done to stop this catastrophe or at least slow the damage from that destroyed dam?
Well, I did bring up the United Nations. They are waiting with the team to go in. They have, World Health Organization who wants to be there to do testing, international food organizations to make sure that there's potable water given out to those that they can rescue. The International Atomic Agency, IAEA, they have already visited that nuclear power plant that gets its cooling water from the dam. However, now they want increased access because of that reservoir that we talked about, that cooling pond that they that is there, that's fed from the Cahoca Dam reservoir. The international monitors want more access to make sure that that largest nuclear power plant in Europe does not have similar effects, does not have that mining that already we know the Russians laid out all across the Cahoca Dam, and that's what blew it up. So we want to make sure there are more and more international attention. And, I know everybody wants this to, come to a conclusion, but, I'll just point out that earlier this week in the International Court of Justice in The Hague, there was a case being argued between Russia and Ukraine, and it was still about that MH17 civilian airliner from 2014. So unfortunately, the wheels of justice move very slowly in this instance.
Andriy Dobryansky with the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. We appreciate you being with us. Many thanks.